Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Russ, K52UX, Cheryl, W5MOO, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 488 of Linux in the Ham Shack, the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. You have tuned into our deep dive episode, so welcome in. We're glad you're here. And tonight we have an interview with some folks we haven't talked to in almost 2 years, so it's going to be a good show. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you get some information out of it. And before we get rolling, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm Russ, K5TUX. Cheryl, W5MOO, is on assignment.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right. Let's see. How are we going to do introductions? Well, I'll just tell you who's here, and then we'll go down the list here. So the first of our interviewees for tonight is Ed Wilson, N2XDD, of the M17 project, and apparently many other projects at the moment. But the one we're interested in is M17. So how's it going tonight, Ed?
That's going good, Russ and Bill. Thanks for having us back here. Actually, I didn't make the first show, so thanks for having me on.
Well, of course we have to have you on because you insert yourself in everything M17 these days, from what I understand. So we had to have you on. And then we also have Steve Miller. I'm not going to make the same joke I made last time. I'm pretty sure I had to have said something about Steve Miller. So I'm not going to do that this time. He's Kilo Charlie 1 Alpha Whiskey Victor. And how's it going tonight, Steve?
It's going great. Thank you for having us again.
Yeah, well, we're always glad to have you guys on because I know there has got to be a lot of development since the last time we talked, so we're going to talk about all that. But before we get into it, I don't know who wants to take the lead on any of these questions. I guess we'll let you guys sort it out. But let's start with, what is M17?
Alrighty, I'll start off that one. M17 is a new digital voice protocol that's completely open source. That's in development. It was started in Poland by SP5WWP, that's Wojciech, and it's since turned into a worldwide community of like-minded individuals who are contributing and adding to the slowly building success of the project.
All right, that's a nice succinct summary. I like it. And when we talked to you guys last, you were software only. You were working on the codec, and you didn't have your big fat grant from the ARDC that you have now, so things were a little bit tighter back then. And I know you had some preliminary work on hardware, but there wasn't much development. You guys were also working with the OpenRTX project, or at least collaborating with OpenRTX. I don't know how you want to phrase that, but to get this stuff into hardware. So let's talk a little bit about where you've come since March of 2021.
Well, March 2021, that seems so long ago. There's so many things that have been going on, and yeah, you're correct. We were basically just software. We were really trying to hammer out the protocol at the beginning stages before we got that grant from ARDC. But since then, a lot more work has gone into hardware with I like to call them our sister project, OpenRTX. They're developing firmware for currently existing off-the-shelf radios like the UV380 or the MD380, the MD380 UV, I don't know, the dual band one, and they're also taking a look at some of the Yaesu Fusion radios, Radio Tool, which is a project that flashes their firmware onto these radios, also works on the A-Lunts HD1, so that's another DMR radio. So we have a bunch of targets that we're currently working with OpenRTX in order to get M17 put into, and we have a few pieces of hardware that we're working on. One is called the Module 17, which is a speaker mic adapter for existing radios. So if you're familiar with the SM1000, that's a free DV voice modem for HF. Well, we designed a VHF and UHF version of that using the M17 protocol. So you have a speaker mic go into a board that's off board from the radio, and then that plugs into the data port on the back of a 9600 baud capable radio. The one that we've been playing around with is the FTM 6000 from Yaesu. That seems to work very well. GM 300 and those series of Motorola radios work well. The Weris, radios, so like the CDMs, the handheld version of those as well. Those may work. But that's the smart mic, but we're also working on a small QRP radio kind of thing that's essentially a dev board for, it's probably going to be the CC1200 RF chip, but we could also probably spin it for an ADF 7021, but those chips are hard to find. But it's basically going to be development for an HT that's going to be strictly M17 and FM. So, we got some hardware that we're working on ourselves. DB9 MAT and SP5 WWP are heading up the development of those. And like I said, the Open RTX project, they're working on existing radios and building the firmware for those as well.
All right, very good. So we'll get into the hardware in a little bit. And I don't think when we talked the first time that you even mentioned Yaesu as an option. So I think it was mostly the Titera stuff.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so interesting that you're branching out, and I know you had mentioned that you had always wanted to get your own hardware, and now apparently that's further along. So that's good to hear too. You'll just be adding to the marketplace of all these digital radio options. I know. I think early on you said that your hope was to like unify or maybe even eliminate some of the other things, just kind of become the one ring to rule them all of the digital world. Do you see that as a possibility anymore, or are you just going to be another player?
Well, it's interesting to think of that in that way, because we're developing a digital radio protocol that is strictly designed for amateur radio. And the only other one that we know of that was strictly developed for amateur radio was D-Star. People will argue and say that Fusion was developed for amateur radio, but it's C4FM, it's P25. So they're basically taking P25 and putting it into amateur radio. DMR was designed, I believe, as a commercial product, and it was adopted by amateur radio. So what we're doing is we're developing a new radio protocol. I don't want to think that we're trying to eliminate anything, but yes, I believe that we want to become an additional alternative that's free and open source that anybody can go ahead and implement into their products if they want to.
But if we did take over the digital part of amateur radio, it would not be a bad thing.
Well, assuming that your protocol is as good as all the other ones, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And that's the great thing about having such a large community is that we take the concerns and gripes and everything that people have about other protocols, and we develop our protocol to be better than that. So, people are talking about, dual time slot with DMR. Well, we don't want to do that. We're doing FDMA. People talk about talk groups, and how difficult it is to program a DMR radio. Well, how can we make it better? So we make it a whole lot more simple for people to get onto the air, rather than having to sit there and basically program a radio in order to do what you want with it. We're developing a radio that you turn on, you put your call sign in, and if you're familiar with operating an HT for analog, all you got to do is just put in your channels and you're ready to go.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've always touted about, well, not C4FM, but the idea of the Fusion radio specifically, because it makes digital a lot easier than DMR.
Yeah.
So you guys are following that same sort of paradigm.
Yeah, and so if the way that I like to describe it is, if you're familiar with the way how easy Fusion is and the networking system that D-Star uses, we're kind of combining those two.
Do you see this as like, are you going to do a thing where you have internet parts to the M17 protocol? Is that going to be part of it?
Sure.
Like, okay. So are you going to have like your own setup, like people will be able to do rooms like they do in WiresX and things like that? Or are you going to take it a different direction?
So we have a reflector protocol and a reflector system that was developed by Tom N7TAE. If you're familiar with OpenQuad, we have a reflector system that's built based off of XLX, which was a multi-protocol reflector system for D-Star Fusion, DMR, and basically anything that you can put into it, it will basically repeat it. Our M17 reflector called MREF-D was developed by them. So yeah, we have reflectors and channels or modules. They're actually called modules. So if you're familiar with like D-Star, where people will say reflector DCS50 module C, or if they want to go to reflector 50 Charlie, well, we have the same sort of thing. So I have a reflector that's run by the M17 project, so we call it reflector M17, and then we have modules on that. And it can be used for anything that you want. You get 26 letters that you can play with, 26 modules, and they're all designated by letter, and you can do whatever you want with them. You could spin up your own reflector, and you'd have a whole slew of channels or modules on that you want to play around with, and so yeah, it's a bit easier than what I would say setting up a room in Fusion for. Because, I think the Fusion stuff is a bit proprietary and it has to run on Windows, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't really delved deep into that yet, but, yeah, it's similar to, if people are familiar with running their own XLX reflector, it's the same idea.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about getting into some of the details of the reflectors and things. I know we talked about that a little bit the first time around. I actually run my own MREF-D as well. And I also have a Fusion repeater. So yes, as far as I know, it's all proprietary. It all runs on Windows, which is an unfortunate thing. MREF-D, of course, based on XLX, so you can run it on Linux, which is great. But that was kind of leading to the next question I wanted to ask, which is if you're an amateur radio operator now and you don't want to wait for hardware and you just want to spin up and try out M17, what are the best ways to do that?
The best ways of doing that right now with, any equipment that you have on hand. Well, first you can use mVoice, which is the first client that was written for M17. It's internet based, so you just run the client on your computer, plug a headset into it, and you can link up to any reflector. There's also DroidStar, which is a multi-protocol client for multiple modes. M17 is native to DroidStar, so you don't need any additional hardware. Whereas if you were doing DMR or any of the other modes with DroidStar, you would need an Ambi chip to do the digital stuff. But M17, because it's a software codec, it's built into DroidStar without any additional software or hardware needed, so you can run M17 right there. If you have a hotspot or a MMDVM hat for like Raspberry Pi, you can run Jonathan G4KLX's M17 client, and now you basically have a little portable radio that you can take with you. I have actually 2 boxes that are set up for M17 client. All I do is plug in a battery and I plug in a headset and I can get M17 over RF. So those are the quickest way with existing hardware. But with a little bit of time and patience, you can modify an MD380 to do M17 as well. So you got M17 over RF using that hardware as well.
So if you're doing M17 over RF, if you want to, what would you be connecting to? Are there existing M17 repeaters? Is that something you see, or what are you linking to as RF for M17?
So the easiest way to link into M17 over RF is through a repeater, of course, or a hotspot. Pi-Star with some additional scripts that were written by Alessio. I forget his call sign off the top of my head. I bet you Ed would probably be able to tell us that. But he has a set of scripts that will modify Pi-Star to include all of the M17 software and firmware for your Pi-Star build that you currently have. So if you have an HT or you have M17 client, you can use that in order to get into the hotspot that's running the M17 stuff. There are repeaters that are running M17 right now. I have one that's literally about 50 feet to my right. That is a Bridgecom DMR radio, but it is a multi-protocol DMR Fusion. What else do I have? I have D-Star, Fusion, DMR, and M17 running on that repeater. And there are several in the United States that I'm aware of. There's a few over in Europe. There's one in Italy. There's one in Germany. There's one in Poland that I know of right off the top of my head. So there are repeaters out there. And if you are running a MMDVM based repeater, such as the Bridgecom or, maybe a high power hotspot or a couple of radios plugged into an MMDVM modem, you can build M17 right into that and add it as an additional feature to an existing repeater.
IU5BON, that's Alessio who wrote the script to get M17 onto your Pi-Star.
So if you have M17, if you use Alessio's scripts and you get Pi-Star configured for M17, then you can use M17 with any radio you can connect to Pi-Star with.
Yeah, as long as it speaks M17. So it would have to be a modified MD380 or another hotspot or MMDVM modem that can speak M17 or even the module 17.
So do you use the Pi-Star then to connect to what you want to connect to, like a reflector or something, or do you have radio control?
Yeah, you do have radio control as well. That was built into the M17 gateway. That was also written by Jonathan G4KLX. You can send, you have your call sign and then you have your target that you want to transmit to. So you can transmit to all, which is basically a broadcast, or you can transmit specifically to a specific call sign or a specific reflector, and that will automatically change your hotspot or your repeater over to that reflector, and then you'll be talking on that.
All right, that's pretty cool. You said something about, I don't want to necessarily correct you if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. You were talking about DroidStar not being able to use other protocols like DMR and YSF and stuff like that. You can, because there is a software vocoder.
It's a gray area of legality. But
well,
yes.
Okay, fair enough. But I know the one place that you used to host the vocoder, they pulled it down. So D-Star was always problematic because that one actually does require the MB chip, and you can't even if because go
that
ahead.
runs IMBE rather than AMBE.
Right.
And there's no software IMBE vocoder that I'm aware of.
Right. All right. Well, before I ask any more questions, let me see if Bill has anything for you guys.
I've just been adding notes to the show notes with links to everything that everybody's mentioned. So
Bill's
I'm just trying to keep up here.
Yeah, I got a list of the links here. If I can copy that over to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm just getting them anyway. So I've got most of them. So
he's even running them. Yeah, go ahead.
We've also, I think we were down in Orlando at Hamcation. We had demonstrated DroidStar on a couple of old cell phones, and we had OTG cables hooked up, and we had USB Zoom sticks, and that was pretty much our RF deck. And we were pretty much going M17 simplex between two of those setups. Granted, it was only a tenth of a watt, but it was possible to hook up your MMDVM into DroidStar as well and use that as your RF.
Oh, that's interesting. So you were actually doing simplex at the event without any intermediaries, no repeaters, nothing, just straight simplex M17. So
yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Had you guys ever tried working with that before as proof of concept or anything, or was that the first time you got it up and running?
Yeah, I think that was the first time that we got it up and running. It was shortly after Doug had built in the ability to add a serial device to a DroidStar client that's running. So it was basically hot off the presses once we got there to Hamcation.
So what have you guys been doing as far as, the public? I know you go to various events. I know you go up to the Northeast because Steve is up in the North. Well, you're both up in the Northeast, technically. Steve's more in the Northeast than I'm familiar with. But so what events do you guys go to? Where do you hit up? Like if people wanted to talk to you about M17 and see you guys in person and maybe check out this simplex operation and stuff, like where do you guys hit during the year?
So the most recent one that we did was Nearfest this past October. Before that, we were at we went
Boxborough Ham
Boxborough,
Fest.
yeah. That one was a lot of fun. There was a lot of really interested people there. It was very technical and very technical minded people at that event. Before that, yeah, I think that was another Nearfest, and Hamcation was before that. But basically, like Ed and I don't have to go to these events. If somebody wants to go to an event and represent M17 for us, they're part of the community. We know who they are, and they want to go to an event and represent M17. They can do that. So we'll set up, their we'll help them set up credentials and all that other stuff if they need to. For example, Maitland went to GNU RadioCon, and I sent him some, promotional materials, and he went and he represented M17 for us there. So, even though Ed and I might not be at the event, we still have people that do want to go out and show off what M17 can do. So if there's people that are well versed in how we do things, as far as like what we're talking about with the Droid Star stuff, or if they have a modified MD380 or they have an M17 client build, they can go to an event. We'll help them get set up. So don't just look for me and Ed. If somebody else wants to do it, let us know.
All right. Well, I know you guys were at Hamvention because we talked with you. Well, talked with Ed anyway. We didn't talk with you, Steve.
Yeah, I missed out on that one. I'm sorry.
No, it's quite all right. But it was good to talk with Ed. So are you guys planning to be there next year?
I believe so.
All right, good. We'll be looking forward to that. So, without getting into too many specifics, because we did mention that you applied for and received a grant from the ARDC grant, fund, for the M17 project. So how have you been leveraging that?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that we've been able to do with that. So back in 2020, I believe it was. Was that
21.
Correct? 21? Okay.
Yeah, it seems like it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got a grant for $250,000 to basically really get us up off the ground as far as building a new digital radio mode for amateur radio is concerned. And ARDC became very interested in what we were doing and gave us that grant for equipment. So we've got all kinds of RF gear that we can use in order to help develop the RF protocol. We have books that have basically all the information that we would need and for, to do the research into it. We built a lab, here in Newmarket. So, there's a little bit of paperwork that still needs to be finished with that, but that lab should be running, very soon. So that one will have, all the test gear that we have, up here in New Hampshire. It'll have, benches for people to come in and play around with stuff, or even just, help out and do the research, run our servers, that kind of thing. We're also putting some of the money towards developing the hardware that we're looking at, or I'm sorry, not looking at, but the hardware that we're developing, Module 17, the Mini 17. We're providing bounties for people that are providing solutions to problems that we don't have the resources readily available for. So if somebody hasn't, if we have a problem and somebody says, "Yo, I'll solve it," we'll just go ahead and
thanks for no price.
I was hoping somebody would pick up on that.
Oh, I'm just not saying anything.
So yeah, I mean, if somebody can come up with a solution to a problem that we're trying to, overcome, we have money available for bounties for that. People that are putting in the most effort are seeing the most benefit off the ARDC grant.
So I may have asked you this the first time around, but I'm going to ask it again for people who don't want to go all the way back to episode 396 to pick up the original discussion. So Wojciech was the one who sort of founded the whole project. I guess it all started with him. So he's in Poland, but you guys are in New England and New York, and then you have additional folks in Italy and of course the Open RTX project and all that. So how did you all get involved in this?
Well, it's a long and sordid story. Not really, but, so back in 2019, Wojciech was starting the whole M17 project with his local radio club, SP5 KAB, I believe it was. And,
I think so.
Yeah. And, people weren't, I guess they weren't really all that interested in what he was doing. Some people were, but, I guess it didn't garner enough interest for him to really keep going. So, he was joining an IRC chat room that, I happened to be involved with. And, it was amateur radio centric. And he was like, hey, there's this new protocol that I'm working on. Is anybody interested? And I just kind of followed along just to see what it was. And now here I am running all the servers and doing the lab stuff and all the other crazy things that have really been coming out of this project. So yeah, 2019, that was a big year for me. I got involved with Wojciech. He just kind of randomly popped up in my chat room and said, hey, what's going on? You want to work on this?
Some might say he was stalking you, Steve.
Yeah, well, he was stalking me after he figured out that I had an interest in what was going on.
I happened to see the project on KB6NU's website. Dan had posted a picture of Wojciech with a taped together circuit board, which was his original idea for an M17 capable radio, and that was originally called the TR9. So I had seen this, and I'm like, this is awesome. I was just starting to get back into amateur radio, and it was right around the time where I was getting ready to retire from my 9-to-5. And I was in a Discord room that was, I guess it was kind of like a hacker DEF CON type of Discord server, and people were talking about M17, and there was a lot of bad information being passed about the project, and somehow Wojciech jumped into the server, and he kind of told everybody what it was all about, and wasn't happy with a lot of people talking crap about the project. So he kind of stormed in the server and stormed out. And about 3 or 4 hours later, I had a friend request on Facebook from him, which was kind of strange and stalkerish. And that's how my journey with the project began.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how things all work out, isn't it? So I know you guys have a very active Discord server. That's where a lot of information about this is presented. And in the true vein of open source, you guys talk about like everything in there. It's not just about the project itself and where it's going and what you guys are doing, but you have some technical channels in there where you actually are talking about the chips you're using, the code you're writing, the spectrum analyses of waveforms of the audio for the project and everything. So you can really get deep into M17 and even its internals if you want to.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've got, we try to break everything out into, kind of like a main topic for each one of the channels. But like you said, it's a hugely active community, and, we've got our regulars and we've got people that pop in from time to time. And that's what really spearheaded the whole idea of M17 not just being a radio protocol, but also being a community. So we're kind of, pivoting a little bit to include not just M17, but also basically anything that could be considered like an open source amateur radio project kind of thing. So we've got things on 3D printing. We've got things on code writing. We've got things on development of firmware, development of hardware. We've even got our own little, off-topic channel that seems to get abused more than the others. But, it's really grown into a great community of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of brilliant minds that pop in and out of there, and I just sit back and browse through the channels, and you just learn so much about what's going on, and that's what a lot of people do. I think a lot of people just sit back and they follow along. They don't necessarily contribute on a daily basis to our Discord, but they're definitely keeping up with different things that are happening.
All right, very good. So have you thought of anything to ask Bill before I keep rolling on here?
Yeah, I got a couple things. So,
all right, good.
You guys were talking about,
finally,
you guys were talking about having to, yeah, jeez. You guys were talking about having to do different chips and stuff like that. So has the chip shortage or this supply chain shortage issue caused some issues with selecting chips for your dev boards?
Yeah, it has. It's become very difficult to find some of the more popular chips that we're trying to implement into our products. I say products, but it's like a development board right now. The reason that we actually switched from an ADF 7021 to a CC 1200 is that in our research we've found out that the ADF 7021 is quite deaf. So if you've got a hotspot and you try to go anywhere beyond like 100 feet, you're not going to be hitting that Pi Star or whatever you might have that runs that chip. So we've decided that, all right, well, let's take a look at other chips that are 4FSK capable. And Wojciech said, well, let's try the CC1200. Now, I'm going to argue that I was the first one to say that we should use the CC1200, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, part of our research is not just trying to get around this chip shortage thing, but also try to find the best chip for us.
So yeah, I guess I'm going to change topics again because that way I'm just trying to wrap all this stuff because I have a DMR radio and a D-Star radio, which I don't use.
Yeah, I've got a whole stack of different radios here. That,
so. Is this something that is capable of running on HF in any way, like kind of like free DV or something like that? I know you require FM, so I'm thinking like maybe even like 10 meters FM or something like that. Would that even be a possibility to modulate M17 for direct contact on HF?
So anything that can that you can transmit a signal that's 9 kilohertz wide and at a baud rate of 9600. So that really kind of anything under 30 megs is questionable. Well, anything under 10 meters is completely outright. 10 meters, 6 meters, it's kind of questionable. I have to recheck the rules, but we're really aiming for VHF and up. So 2 meters and above. We don't want to step on the toes of the people that are working on free DV because they're doing an excellent job for HF. But our signal, the way that, it's modulated and how wide it is just too much for HF. I mean, that just completely rules it out. But the aperture space has never really been served by codec 2 in 2 meters and up. So that's what we are doing. We're creating that modulation or that mode that you can use for 2 meters and up for the codec 2. Free DV is the same codec. It's codec 2 written by Dave Rowe, but it's developed for HF. It's much skinnier. It's not as wide on the on the frequency. Yeah, not as beefy on the frequencies, and does an excellent job for things like fading and that kind of things. Those kind of issues that you would have on HF, but with our modulation being 2 meters and up, it's much wider. So yeah, we don't plan on doing anything on HF.
Yeah, so that way you don't have a data rate cap either, because I guess 4FSK is natively 9600 baud or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so
4800 symbols a second or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's why you need 9 kilohertz. So, cool. That answers some of my questions. So, back to you, Russ.
Okay, so the 9 kilohertz. What's the reason for that? Are you doing it for audio quality, or do you plan on being able to carry data or image or anything like that? Or
yeah, that's probably a question for Wojciech because he was the one that created the RF side of it. But yes, digital voice is digital data. So, it doesn't matter if you're transmitting voice or if you're transmitting text. It's still digital radio. It's still, so you can transmit a text file, you can transmit a photo, you can transmit your voice. So I'm not 100% sure of why it's so wide. Because that goes into a lot more, RF theory than I have in my head right now. But I do know that that's what it is. It's 9 kilohertz wide and that 9600 baud.
Yeah, because codec 2, or at least when it's being used for free DV, I think they get that down to under 2 kilohertz or something like that.
I think the most recent is, I just saw a video and I think it was like 2.3 that they're getting up to. But they have a 700 baud mode for codec 2 that's a lot less wide.
Right. I mean, you're gonna lose a lot of audio quality with that narrow bandwidth, but all that matters is if the signal is understandable. So, I mean, you have to do that. I mean, even on some of the other digital protocols, you're going to get, even with a wider bandwidth signal, you still get some audio artifacting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, all right. So where do you guys go from here? What's the future for M17?
Ed, what's your future?
It's world domination. That's where we're heading for.
I thought you were opening up a deli.
That too, amongst the other jobs that I seem to be juggling lately. Thank God for retirement. I think our next thing, we're going to try and get some of these Module 17 boards into the hands of some users. We're going to try and do like an early adopter program. Probably not going to be too early next year. We'll do some sort of a, donate to Open Collective Foundation, which is our fiscal sponsor. And, we haven't set a price yet, but make a donation in the name of M17 and we'll send you out a board. So we'll get some early adopters out there. We'll get some people to help us and help us break the boards and get all the bugs out. And then from there, we'd like to shrink it down. So I think a lot of our focus is going to be on hardware within the coming year. Hardware and finishing up the lab up in New Hampshire that Steve talked about earlier. And we want to do some more traveling and get out there and see some people and get some ideas and show off all the goodies that we have so far.
All right, Steve.
I like Ed's Sherwin-Williams approach to what we're going to do in the future, cover the earth kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, Ed's got some great ideas as far as getting that M17, the Module 17, stuff out there, which is a great idea. I want to see more people using M17 in the future. We have support from RFinder. They're building M17 into their what is that? The B1 radio that they're working on.
The B1 Plus.
Yeah, so they're building M17 into their stuff. We want to see more of that. We want to see more adoption of M17 into a commercial product. That's one of the great things about doing open source is that anybody can take what we're doing and put it into their product. So the more people that implement M17, the bigger M17 will become. And the more people that use it, the more drive that we have for continuing this project. I also, of course, like Ed said, I want to get that lab up and running. I want to get people in there. I want to get people to help us out. I want to bring more internet stuff for M17 into the whole project. Right now, we're running obviously our website, but we're also running the Reflector repository registry. We've got a couple other side projects that are working as far as software is concerned. So there's a repeater directory that's being worked on. There's a couple other software-based stuff for M17 that I can't really talk about right now because it's super secret squirrel stuff. But it's going to be basically, I want to revolutionize the way that digital communications are handled for the internet and amateur radio, because we've got this internet thing. Let's make use of it. It's just another tool in the amateur radio operator's toolbox, really.
Well, I personally am looking forward to getting up to see the the lab you've got going up there, because I grew up 10 minutes from Newmarket, so I know exactly where you guys are.
Yeah, it's a popular area, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's getting very expensive to live up there, so.
Yeah, I'm not happy about that, though.
I think one of the other things we'd like to do in the coming year is make M17 a little bit more user-friendly. I think because of the complexity of it, it scares away the average ham, especially things like the modification of the MD380. It's not really an easy mod for the less experienced tinkerer. So I'd like to see us work on some introductory docs to get out there and introduce people to M17 and show them how easy it is to start off with, even just using DroidStar as, granted it's only a cell phone app, but you can definitely, give it a ride around the block and see how it responds. Some of the other topics that I'd like to show some videos and documentation is adding M17 to Pi-Star. and flashing a MMDVM board to the newest firmware to support that as well. So, and I think that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I'm definitely not the tech part of the team, but I try and break things down. A lot of times, in projects like this, people, these big brain people that I have the pleasure of working with, they seem to think that everybody's on the same page as them. And
it gets pretty overwhelming real quick.
Yeah, so sometimes I have to go in there and I have to ask the questions. And if I'm asking the question, that means 5% of the other hams out there have the same question. So I try and, I don't want to say dumb it down, but I try and simplify it, I guess. Which is very important for a project like this, because I think at times it does scare people away. So that's definitely on the top of the list of things to do in the coming year for the project.
All right. So you talk about, things being a little difficult as far as usage, and I know you're working on that, but what would you like to see from the community, from amateur radio operators, as far as getting into M17 and just sort of not promoting by advertising, but promoting by using the protocol? How would people get in and make it more widely known?
So I think once we get the Module 17 in a few more hands, I think logically the next way to go is get it in the hands of some of the YouTubers out there. It seems like most people nowadays, most hams get a lot of their news and radio suggestions from the whole YouTube crowd. I think that's the way to go for to get a larger group of hams involved. And I think once we go there, we definitely going to have to simplify it a lot. So, that's my take on it. I think, the exposure via YouTube it's what's going to help this grow.
Yeah,
all right.
And from the amateur radio community as a whole, I want to see more people, taking a look at what the documents are, telling us any sort of roadblocks that they're coming across. We do have a few people in our Discord server that do literally everything that they can with M17 with the hardware and software that's currently available, and give us bug reports, give us hey, wait a second, this didn't work, or even just say, hey, look, I got this going. That's what Ed was saying, with people having these questions. If we don't know those questions or those concerns that people have, we won't be able to fix it. So if you do come across something that you don't understand or you need a hand with, come in and just chat with us. I like to think that we're a pretty friendly group of people, and even if one of us isn't Ed or myself or Wojciech or Mike or anybody else that's part of the core team isn't available, the community has a whole lot of smart people that are ready and willing to help. So and they'll bring those concerns and questions and everything that they come up with and send them over to us, and we'll do things like improve the documentation or come up with a simpler set of steps on how to do something. One of the more recent things that I did was come up with a set of instructions on how to install M17 client and get it running on a Raspberry Pi for people. And I had one of our community members test it out. I said, if you run into anything, let me know and I'll help you work through it. Now, my support style might not be as friendly as some others, but we got a community that can really help out with it. So,
all right, very good. So you guys, are you still doing your Friday nets?
Yes, every Friday.
All right, that's let's see, what was it, 11 Central or 12 Central?
So,
yeah, what's the UTC on it?
1700 UTC.
Yeah,
that time will never change.
Right, 1700 UTC on the M17-M17C module reflector. Yes,
and Ed's our primary net control.
All right, so anybody can get into that, whether they use DroidStar. You can, if you are a little more technically minded, you can connect via other methods. You can link via All-Star. You can do some craziness to get into the M17 reflector.
Yeah, and you actually bring up a good point here, is that M17 is able to be transcoded without any hardware or questionable software. The software vocoder for Codec 2 is freely available. So, you could have an analog link, like you were talking about with All-Star. You could have an analog link connect to an M17 reflector, and now you don't even need an M17 radio to get into the network. You can go ahead and do it with, an analog radio. As a matter of fact, that's how I do most of my testing, is I have an analog radio connected to All-Star, and then I use that to listen to anything that I'm doing via the digital. So, really a good point that you bring there.
And I believe there's a list somewhere of all the different ways, because there are different links that are hooked into the M17C module, especially when that net's going on. But of course, they're available anytime. So the website is what, m17project.org? Did I get that right?
Yes.
All right. So m17project.org is where you're going to find a lot of the information. So do you guys want to highlight the team at all? If you've got names and call signs up where we can just list the folks, the primaries who are making all this possible?
Yeah. So if you go to m17project.org, up at the top, you have the menu bar, and you click on About M17, and the team list is right there. Heading up at the Oh, geez, I'm trying to scroll and hold my push to talk at the same time. So at the top, we have Wojciech SP5WWP, who's the founder and our lead developer. Further down, there's me. I do systems administration and integrations. I also do all the web development. You have Mike, W2FBI. He does all the software prototyping and development. He's also running his own little shop with modified MD380s. Apparently, there has been a huge calling for those, so he's a little bit behind on getting them all done, but you can place an order through his site. You got Ed, N2XDD, that guy. He's our community manager. Primary net control server, net control station. Mathis DB9 MAT, who does a lot of the hardware development and also developed Module 17. Rob WX90, he's been a little out of action for a while now, but he does a lot of the software stuff as well. He developed MobileLinked, which is a TNC, and he actually built M17 into that TNC. So you can use M17 using a MobileLink TNC or the Nucleo TNC, which is the open source build your own version of the same thing. Doug 88DP, he does software development, mainly DroidStar. So he built the M17 protocol into DroidStar. And then finally, there's Tom N7TAE. He's another software developer. He did the protocol networking, all the reflector software, basically the MRefD and MVoice stuff that you have available for Linux. He developed for us. So that's the core team that we have right now. But we're more than just the core team. We've got
Yeah, there's just countless number of people who from the community who have helped us, including N1IAM Bonnie, who's a returning ham, and she found our project, and she's been helping Steve debug a lot of stuff. And we have Tony VK3JED down in Australia, who's become our spokesman down there. He's done a couple of presentations in Australia at various clubs, and he'll be doing another one later this month. And so many people. People just seem to come out of the woodwork to help us out and contribute. We have another ham. I can't think of his Steve. Who's the guy down in Brazil?
PU4THZ. That's Paulo.
Yeah, he's come. He's fairly a new contributor to the project, but he's been helping us out with some of the work on the M17 board, Module 17 board as well, and just countless number of people out there.
Yeah, he was the one that developed the M17 stuff for SDR Angel so that it could go into Windows, because the SDR Angel implementation of M17 was Linux only at one point, but Paulo actually did a lot of work on getting that working in Windows as well.
All right, fantastic. So I usually wrap up. I don't have any more questions that I can think of. I think we've covered it pretty well. But I always like to ask if there's anything we somehow missed that you guys want to mention before we go ahead and wrap up.
I would like to thank ARDC for the the generous grant that they've bestowed upon us. And don't tell anybody else, but I think we're one of their favorite projects. So that's just a secret between us, Russ. And also our fiscal sponsor, Open Collective Foundation, who've been really awesome to us recently. So that's who I'd like to thank, as well as all the members of the community who come and just see what's going on and contribute when they can and ask questions when they have a problem. And that's it. And Steve, I'd like to thank Steve because he's kind of a cool guy.
I try to be. Yeah, I think we've covered quite a bit. And, like Ed said, I really want to thank our community, because without them, it would be all for naught. I mean, we'd just be sitting here doing it for ourselves, and that doesn't lead to a whole lot of fun. Being part of this project since 2019 has been a roller coaster ride for me, and it's been incredibly educational. I've made a lot of friends, and I can just see this project blowing up in the future with the number of people that are starting to get interested and helping out. And it's been a real fun time, and I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to be doing in the future.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I hope we will get together again before another 2 years goes by to catch up with you all. We're definitely looking forward to see where the M17 project goes from here. And I think everybody who's been listening has all the information they need to participate in the project, whether they want to contribute or just use some M17 on a daily basis. And with that, we'll go ahead and close this out. But I want to thank you guys, Ed and Steve, for being here tonight, telling us all about the project again. And I hope we catch up with you all soon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I do have a little bit of a social media list to go through here. Shouldn't take more than a couple of seconds. Down the list, we have nothing on subscribers, Patreons, Facebook, or Twitter, but we do have a YouTuber, Caleb Prox, who signed up to view the show, I guess, and anything else we put out on YouTube. On Discord, we had several folks join us: Cameron S. Hunt, Kuka, W1WRA, N1IIM, and Crypt Zero, and JKI275. So thanks for joining us on the Discord. We had Shanta, VE7TIT, join us on the mailing list. And listening to us tonight, we had Ted, WA0EIR, Bonnie, N1IIM, previously mentioned, who just joined the Discord, and Winston, KD2WLL. So thanks for listening to the live show, folks. And that brings us down to the end of the show. So thanks once again to Steve and Ed for being here and telling us about M17. Hope everyone has a great week. You can join us again for our Short Topics episode at that time. Thanks for listening tonight. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. This has been episode number 488 of Linux in the Ham Shack. For the on assignment Cheryl, W5MOO, I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD 73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Our website is located at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast by visiting the LHS Patreon page at patreon.com/LHS Podcast, or by using the contribute list on the homepage. We have a presence on Discord, Facebook, IRC, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also drop us an email at info@lhspodcast.info, or leave us a voicemail at 1-909-LHS-SHOW. That's 1-909-547-7469. Visit the online LHS merchandise store at shop.lhspodcast.info for fun and fashionable show-themed merchandise. Until next time, remember to always heed your hedonism.